Hello and welcome to the Large and Unnecessary First Player Token Podcast, episode 44. Euan's doing jazz hands.
Again.
Okay.
I'm doing a lot of visual stuff for the listeners.
My name is Chris.
I'm Euan.
I'm Pawel.
Welcome to the show. We've got a board games episode for you.
We are going to talk about board games.
We've got a pretty juicy board game to talk about.
Aye.
We did one of our epic board games.
Yep. And if you bothered to watch the 5-hour stream, you'll have got that in all of its glory.
Well, somebody did.
Somebody actually watched all... Oh, well, somebody was there.
There was somebody in
live.
that room for whether they were actually actively watching for the full 5 hours. I don't know, but he or she was in the room the whole time.
Hopefully there was a lot of popcorn eaten.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they just tuned in every so often when I had to squeeze out of my place from the table.
So yes, we're going to talk about that. We've also got a couple of other things to talk about, one of which we've talked about before, but it was in such an early episode. I've just disregarded those first 10 episodes or so. I've disowned them. I'm considering just deleting them. They're fucking terrible.
We're in the new
Mostly because I wasn't in them.
I've never gone back and listened to them, so I'm quite happy for them to exist in whatever format.
Well, we just leave them there. In fact, I think we should move them somewhere else on the internet and then just make it a challenge for people to try and find them.
Up.
Yeah, blow that bit of the internet up. We can mine it.
Aye.
Mine it for bitcoins.
Aye. Oh, you got.
I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
Aye, if you mine for bitcoins, you will get the first 16 or so episodes of the Large and Unnecessary First Player Token podcast, which is basically worthless.
Pre-Pavel. The pre-Pavel
Vintage collection, yes.
So yeah, we've got a couple other things to talk about, but let's just launch straight into it then. We're going to talk about A Game of Thrones, the board game.
Of Thrones.
It is A Game of Thrones. So they're making it clear that it's based on the books, which, as we just discussed, will never be finished.
Yes, we were bringing that up earlier on. I don't think, and viewers, listeners, you can write in, because this has been bugging me for a while. I can't think of a single other sort of book series or any single medium franchise that is then being adapted to something else, which is then basically overwhelmed and killed the original thing.
Does it sadden you?
It doesn't really, because the books are not brilliant, to be honest.
It still feels like a bit like an end of a certain era.
It's sad to see somebody give up on their dreams, but you have to wonder whether that was his dream in the first place.
I like to think that movie adaptations are pretty much always inferior to books, with very rare exceptions. But this is probably, as you said, the first time when film, or in this case TV series, has killed the book. There's something wrong about it.
That's the way I'm looking at it. It has literally just killed it dead.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's going to get to the conclusion first, so even if you release them, no one's going to care.
I'm getting a bit worried that we were giving out fake news here.
Oh, have you found something? Have you researched this a bit further?
I'm on Wikipedia, so
have we just honestly used the term fake news on our podcast?
I think I have. It's been stuck in my head.
Fair enough.
I had an argument on Facebook today in which I got accused of posting fake news.
Ah, right. Was that one of Trump's aides?
It might have been, actually.
Did they send a Twitter to you on Facebook?
It was somebody who was very right wing who accused me of posting fake news. So
our podcast is not popular with Trump.
Yeah, it's not.
No.
But yeah, I mean, it doesn't say here that he's not writing it, is the thing. He said that it's not going to be published before the last season of the show.
And that's the second last book isn't going to be out before. Considering he released the previous instalment came out before the show started running, so you're talking maybe about 6-7 years ago.
I know.
And he's got 2 to get out.
I'm going to try and find the article I saw just to clean your conscience. I'm pretty sure that he did say he's not.
I'm sure there's been many things said, and I'm sure there's been many times that he's come out and said, this is doing my head in, people going on about it, so maybe we're not helping.
I mean, are we saying that he's not writing the 7th book, or... Because apparently he's
slogging through the current one.
December 2016, he did say something about The Winds of Winter, which is the 6th book.
Yeah, he's
As
like
in
done another 4
about the
pages
tone
of that.
it. Yeah, he's done 4 more pages. He's a very slow writer for what amounts to absolute drivel.
Oh, getting right in there.
Having said that, the game was awesome.
Yeah, the game was good.
Well,
and that's
yeah.
what we're here to talk
Well,
about.
we're here to talk about the board game, yeah, not Chris's like giant slaying.
I'm upsetting everybody today. Like,
You're on the roll, Chris.
Chris is doing a bit of David and Goliath, and he doesn't care. Like,
sometimes I just like to get on the internet and stir it up a bit.
I think it's called trolling.
aye,
I'm not trolling anybody.
No, it's
I'm
been
just
quite
voicing
sincere.
some opinions.
and riling people up about it.
There's a
isn't there?
difference between trolling and actually having those opinions.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's true, actually. Yes. Yeah.
So anyway,
Let's have an opinion on a Game of Thrones, shall
A
we?
Game of Thrones. I mean, this board game was produced before the TV show. Am I right in thinking?
All right, okay.
Or it was based.
I'm going to say
certainly-
second edition, likely no.
yeah, that's the second edition.
But it is sold as George R.R. Martin's A Game of Thrones, the board game.
Not HBO's.
Yeah, it's not H. with like pictures of the various actors on. That would be a wee bit jarring.
Well, you know what? The art in this game is lovely, and I wouldn't have it any other way. As much as we all love Tyrion, played by Peter Dinklage. This Tyrion here is...
Peter Dunkeld.
Well, that guy, yes. All these cards are really lovely.
Yeah, it's nice to see a different interpretation of that. You know, I do quite I appreciate that in the game, and it's, you know, we had a lot of fun looking at the various character cards and sort of like getting stuck into them basically. Like, what does he look like? Why does that not look like that?
Which
But
is
just for the record, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh,
but the first edition of this game came out in 2003.
wow.
So
that's quite
that's
early.
TV
That's
show,
quite
yeah,
early,
that's- yeah.
And this edition's 2011.
Alright, so that's not even that far into
No,
the lifetime of the TV show.
I think they just jumped straight on the back of the.
Yeah,
probably
they may
thought,
have-
second,
yeah.
this-
And it was a good idea.
Oh, well, yeah. This is and the thing is, for people coming from the TV show going, oh, I like Game of Thrones, I'll get the board game. This maybe isn't the game for some of those people. Certainly if they're
definitely
looking
not.
at it in a casual kind of light.
I mean, the Game of Thrones TV show has got such a weirdly huge audience for what it is. Like, I mean, it's so popular.
Yeah.
But you're talking about people that like I would never ever associate with watching any fantasy related stuff
I
that
don't
are
even
watching
like
a Game of
fantasy.
Thrones.
I've talked about it on this podcast many a time.
Aye.
But yeah, there's something compelling about it. And it's obviously captured people's imagination.
So, you mean violence and sex
yeah.
and nudity?
Tits and Dragons, as I believe
But that was just
Lovejoy
your
said.
session of the Game of
Alright,
Thrones.
yeah, gotcha. Yeah. But that's not in the board game.
Yeah, that's not in the rule book.
Well, there's violence, but that's about that.
Yeah. But it's,
Right.
it's really cautious violence quite a lot of the time as well.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
should
It's
actually
really
make it a bit more organized and structurized. Review.
Well, the occasional there's the occasional bit of accidental violence as well. I found.
Oh yeah.
I mean, essentially the way this game works, anyone familiar with diplomacy will have a kind of rudimentary idea of how the sort of troop movement works and things like that. You have 6 factions in the game. Based
Name
on,
them.
Okay, you got your Starks.
Yeah, I've got your Starks.
You got your Tyrells.
You got your Tyrell.
You got your Tyrell. You got your Fats Dominoes.
The what?
I don't know. What they call the Dornish.
The Martells.
Martells, that's the
Yes.
one.
You've
Got your Lannisters.
Yep.
And your
and yourselves, Greyjoys.
the Greyjoys, yeah. And I'm forgetting the last one.
Baratheon.
Baratheon.
Those.
Baratheon.
So there you go. You got your 6 classic Game of Thrones factions. Your classic factions.
Yeah, they are the classic factions. I mean, essentially, it's centering around the idea of the kind of political struggle for Westeros. It's not bringing in a lot of the sort of other elements that come in at the later.
It really shows that I stopped watching the series very early because I had no idea which faction I was playing,
Well,
which
yeah.
was the gardening one. Anything before the Red Wedding was essentially just Starks, Baratheons, Lannisters, and Greyjoys.
Yeah.
I can't remember the other two really from what I've seen. But in any case,
Yeah, the Tyrells and the Martells in particular, they were much more later in the TV series.
Yeah. Yeah, and they introduced, like, I think quite like, it's like the fourth book or something is the first time you really get to go. You actually, is anything set there? So it's kind of, it's quite sort of far back in the whole mythology, like when the books come.
Anyway, well, we're talking about how the game works. So
yes,
you've got a map of Westeros.
I got your big old map of Westeros. It's all split into various territories. Some of those territories might have things like you might have a stronghold or a castle in them. You might have a crown.
Some provide more influence, some provide more supplies.
Yeah, supplies come in. Yeah, and that's basically once you control those areas, things will give you. You'll get certain benefits from having those things. And there are certain areas that have nothing in them. They're more possibly strategic, or they're more set for battling and things like that. There's some interesting bits like that. Some of the way that the map's set up. But yeah, essentially on your turn, you have tokens to identify your various the various moves you can make, and you have to place one in every single one of your areas.
Well, areas that you have soldiers in.
Yeah. Aye, because you can leave.
You can leave places empty as long as you put influence tokens down, but that's another.
That's a whole other. So yeah, I mean your actions there. You've got raid. Defend, which defense gives you a defend bonus if you get attacked. You've got your marching orders, which are essentially you're allowing you to attack different areas. You can consolidate power, which gives you more sort of influence. And what else was there?
You've got support.
Which is now the way that the battles work in this is quite interesting. So say you've got troops in one area, you want to attack a neighbouring territory, you would put a march order in their territory they're currently in, and then on your turn you'd flip that. Then when it comes to the marching phase, you would then move into that territory and you'd initiate some kind of battle. Now what you can do is, if you've got units in another area adjacent to that territory, and you've put a support token on there, you can then use them to aid you can bolster your combat strength in battle, which gives you a better chance of winning.
But the interesting thing about that, though, the support tokens, is that other players can support battles as well. So you can have a player supporting a battle that they're not even taking part in.
Yeah.
So that's like picking sides, basically.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's a game where you're, to some extent, you're always going to have to form little alliances, and you can't fight everybody around you. It's just not going to work.
Well, you can try.
Well, you can. Yeah, it did happen at certain points in the game. I think we all at some point became the antagonist for everybody.
The only faction my faction has not been touched by was the Starks, because they were just at the far opposite.
It was a geographic
end of the map. Yeah.
But
what you're saying is that the list of rules is relatively
simple. So basically, everybody places order tokens face down, you flip them all up, and then you run through the order tokens, and you start off by doing raids first, which get rid of the other tokens. Basically.
Well, the raids are quite interesting, because they will get rid of support
raids.
Tokens.
And support token can be a tipping thing in a battle.
Yeah, in terms of how it depicts sort of medieval battles and the whole thing with like supply lines and having support from different areas, but if you raid that support, like if you raid that area, they can't then support you and things like that. It's really well,
it does it quite nicely, aye.
And one thing we might just mention, because added to those fairly simple rules are those 3 tracks, which essentially resemble 3 different positions of power in the kingdoms. And as much as I tend to just ignore such things when I play games like a Game of Thrones, they actually are fairly important in this particular one, because one of those tracks is all about the order in which players take their turns, and once you're in actual open warfare with your neighbours,
that can be very important.
That might actually be a matter of life and death, whether somebody raids your supply lines before you get to attack, or things like this.
Oh yeah, like where you are in the turn order definitely dictates how you're going to play your next turn. Like it was always forefront of my mind where I was and what order things were going to happen. You have to be aware of that.
Yeah,
it can be the difference between you holding a citadel and losing it.
Oh yeah,
it really can.
Yeah,
because that's the point of the game. We should actually say,
defeat.
Aye, like it's citadels and castles. It's something like fortresses and castles. It's something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact term for them, but there's bigger ones and little ones basically. But it doesn't actually matter about what size they are. If you hold 7 of them at any point in the game, you win.
Yeah.
Okay?
Which never happens. At least if there's 6 players.
It has happened in games I've played, and in fact, it's happened every time. I think. I don't think we've ever played a game other than that one there.
Yeah.
Which has gone the full 10 rounds.
Must have been all more evenly matched.
It was evenly matched because we were all just like
At each other's
bickering.
throats.
But did you have 6 players when you played until...
I think I've always played it with 6 people. In fact,
Alright. Wow.
Yeah.
that must have
potentially
been
maybe
some-
5 once.
I think the first time I played it with you, it might have been with 5 or 4 because it was definitely
Maybe
Highgarden or
Martel. It's Martel. You drop out first, and then it's Highgarden.
Because I can imagine it being slightly easier to win 7 strongholds if there's less players, but if there's 6 of us, then we barely had any space to actually move without creating fronts.
That's the interesting thing about this game for me. All right, is basically the size of the board. Okay, and the number of territories on the board. Because if the idea of the game is for you to hold 7 citadels, or 7 castles, whatever, or to hold more than anybody else at the end of the 10 rounds, and there's only a limited number of those things on the board, and there's limited space, that's what makes this game so interesting, is the fact that you have to push out. You have to push out quite early if you want to try and get a sort of hold in the game. And then you have to start trying to hold areas and then push forward slightly even more. But everybody quite quickly starts banging their heads off each other.
Yeah.
And as they can kind of, in sort of Game of Thrones style, you can see who's ahead, and you're gunning for them. You're going to be like getting behind them, going, right, okay, let's take this guy down, and that's it's like as they do several times in Game of Thrones.
Which happened quite early in our game. It got to like round 3 or 4, and
normally when we play such games, we usually get through at least 2/3 or 3/4 of the game before everybody says like, he's winning, everybody get him. Whereas in here it was like 2nd or 3rd round, and everybody was fighting everybody.
But there was a point where Neil was like, he had like 6 points worth of.
Oh yeah, he was basically
about to win, but he'd stretched his army so thin across that part of the board that he lost it all so quickly.
Yeah, because we've just all realised, you know what, this turn everybody gets a castle from Neil. Hey,
I don't know who was it that eventually just dragged them back down. Was it you, Euan?
Well, no, I kind of harried him from the river, but it was Dave who was playing as the Lannisters. Because there's a natural kind of thing there with the Lannisters and the Baratheons coming across, and kind of meet in the middle, and that, I would say it's an interesting, because it's very asymmetrical in terms of how you start and where your forces are and everything like that. Like Lannisters, the Baratheons, all of them, they're kind of quite, they've got a bit of, the Baratheons have an odd situation in terms of like being on an island and then sort of moving on to the mainland and everything like that. But yeah, probably like the Lannisters and the Martells and the Tyrells have a slightly similar kind of starting setup where you have a fairly sort of tradition. You've got these areas and you've got a few soldiers about. The Starks they're just plonked up in the north. It's a difficult start. I remember playing them before.
The Starks are so isolated.
Yeah.
And they kind of like they exaggerate that on this board as well by making their starting areas are like much bigger territories. But it doesn't actually make any difference in the game itself. They're just different territories. It's just the fact that they've deliberately made them huge so that the Starks will look isolated when they're sitting up there on their own.
That's fairly unique in board games, I presume, because we do have quite a lot of competitive strategic board games with asymmetric factions, but geography is never a factor to consider here, whereas there are some differences, quite a lot of differences, I suppose, between these factions. Most of them come in cards rather than, I don't know, number of soldiers or number of supplies. But geography, your placement on the board, is actually what matters a lot in this game.
Oh yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It really
One
does.
thing that really surprised me, and I think it actually also surprised me last time we played, as in before this time, is the actual sea and how fast you can get around the
Boats
continent
are
on
important
boats.
in this game.
And I keep forgetting it, and then Greyjoys just do what they do. And this is what I also wanted to say. That, I was very impressed by how everybody role-played their factions, which it was heartwarming and also bloody.
Well, there is a lot of stuff that's kind of, it's put in there almost like deliberately to kind of get you to do certain things. Like there is because the Greyjoys have an odd starting setup where they have, like, pikes you'd struggle to take, basically, because they've already got a navy, and you're not going to bother them, and they've got like a citadel across the way, and they've got like a reasonable force there and everything like that. And they're sort of, they can get a lot of boats out, and they have this one sea, because the way that the sea territories are worked out, there's just this one stretch of water that goes from Pike all the way down to just next to the Tyrell territory to one of like a supply line. So it's kind of just set up for them to just be raiding the coast and pirating the hell out of everything.
Yep.
And you did.
I did. I felt I missed it. I felt like I should have dominated the seas more than I did. I kind of just stayed in that one area. I should have just been smashing through all of it, because I was like, I'm not going to win this. I should really just be messing with people.
I think you've achieved that goal. You were messing with people, yeah.
My other advice for if you're going to play the Greyjoys, ally with the Starks. Don't fall into the trap of allying with the Lannisters, because they can't do shit to you. The Starks can be a real bother.
We've only got a few more minutes of talking about this game before we'll have to move on, but there was a lot of interesting things happened in that game, and that was one of the, like, of the 3 or 4 games of this that I've played, that was my favourite session. Even though it really felt like it was just people just battering up against each other for a lot of the time and not going very far. Because, like I say, it went the full 7 rounds, and I think whoever won it, well, we know who won it, but right, okay, you've ruined it now. I was going to say go and watch the video, but now Pavel's told everybody the Starks won.
I thought you had a set up for a joke there. Or something.
But I think they only had like 4 castles or something.
Oh yeah, by the time it got to that point,
Pavel, you were drawn with them.
Yeah.
And it was the only 2 people that had that many castles. Everybody else was on 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And that's like, that was so weird to see that, because generally you see somebody just, like, people up pulling ahead, there's a couple of people on 6 and everybody else is kind of fucked. But there was a few interesting things. Me and Pavel had like a dodgy alliance going on, which was really solid, and I kept giving Pavel the brownies of friendship all the way through the game, which he found delicious.
I was suspicious of your behaviour from minute 1 in that game, to be honest.
I was so confused through the entire day. I even went back home and I was still confused. What just happened?
I can't sit still in an empty room, so like I had to start attacking somebody at some point. So I ended up just attacking my ally just for fun more than anything else. But then also like really annoying the Baratheons, because the Baratheons were kind of pushing down towards my area, and I was like, no, I'm not having fun. I'm not having this. I'm not drawing a border here. so I had some fun with that. The Lannisters, Dave, played a really solid game. Like, really solid. That went fucking nowhere.
The Lannisters dominated.
It was workmanlike.
It was like mechanical Roman Empire style stuff. He was drawing up borders, he was making buffer zones and stuff, and he was like, pushing out very slowly, and it went nowhere.
I was extremely wary of him, to the point that at the end of the game I just went, do you know what, I'm just going to attack the Lannisters. I think I took one of his citadels, even knowing full well I was going to lose one to John, but I was like, do you know what, I'm having that.
1 for 1, that's a fair swap.
I was just before we sort of sign off, there was one mechanic of this that I think we've touched on, but we haven't really talked about, was the cards.
The cards, yeah.
For the battles. You do for each...
And those are quite important.
Yeah, I mean, there is a big thing. I mean, each faction has a wee deck of cards you have, and they're all based on the characters from their sort of part of the story. There's a weird one where Brienne of Tarth's in with the Baratheons, which doesn't... Oh,
she worked for everybody.
She was with Renly, though. So yeah, I mean, so the characters you're familiar with, and they have, they'll have like a combat strength which will add to your combat strength, and they all have, most of them have some kind of special ability, or they give you a sword symbol, which means if you win, you're going to kill a unit. Or a defence symbol, if you lose, you can save one of these units and you just route them instead to another area.
That's quite an interesting thing, that, because you need sword symbols on your cards to actually kill units.
Yeah.
And if they don't have them, they just retreat instead. And that's quite an interesting thing, because that adds to the whole overcrowding of the board thing, which is part and parcel of this game,
Yeah.
which is that eventually everybody has a lot of units on the board and nowhere for them to go without killing each other, basically.
And there's certain ways that your armies can only, because you have your supply lines, that dictates the amount of the however many supply lines you have dictates the size of armies you can have.
Yeah.
And that can become a real problem, and you eventually find yourself not even so much bolstering your armies, but taking things away from one to like replace it, just make slight changes. Certainly for me, I was kind of got to the point that my supply just could not keep up with what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I remember I was worried about not being able to muster enough forces at the beginning of the game, and at some point I just realised
Realising you couldn't anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Which I suppose again is the nature of such a global conflict.
Yeah.
Armies are everywhere. It's politics and
marches on its
strategy
stomach.
that really mattered.
Yep.
So
that's another interesting thing, because like the meta game of this, the politics of this game is what makes it interesting. It's the talking between the players.
Yeah.
That's not actually just, like I say, it's the meta game. It's nothing to do with actual playing, moving things about on the board. It's just like talking to each other, setting things up, forming alliances, breaking alliances, stabbing your best mates in the back, all that sort of stuff. This game has got all of that, and it's got it in spades, and it's fucking brilliant for it.
Yeah,
I've been stabbed in the back many times during such games, but never with such wicked class as this particular one.
The best thing was, I stabbed you in the back and then tried to put you on the throne.
And you almost succeeded as well. I was so confused, honestly.
Confusion is just that's how I
if this was the goal, then you know what, well done.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think the what happens on the board kind of just really reflects the state of mind of the player in that particular turn. Really.
Oh yeah.
It was. I mean, we had an extremely dynamic game.
We kept drinking more caffeine as the day went on as well, so I don't think that helped.
So if you compare it with some of our games where we essentially are always on the defensive, this time I think we got our money's worth of this particular game.
Aye. I paid for it.
Yeah, so I definitely did. Yeah,
I got Pawel's money's worth.
There you go. No, it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it.
We need to wrap this up. So that's a Game of Thrones. Who designed that, Pawel? That's why I gave you the box so you can tell me these things.
It's a dude called Christian T. Peterson.
Oh yes, he also did Twilight Imperium, I believe.
Oh,
so that's your
so he's been the star of the epic game.
3 to 6 players, but 6 players is probably the best.
Yeah, I would recommend if you can play this with 6 people, because it's clearly been designed for that, and also, you want as many people as possible.
Yeah, also play it with people whom you hate or who you really like, so that you can just completely backstab them.
Indeed.
Yeah. And
do you want to give this a rating, Euan? You've not done a rating for a long time.
I'm struggling, like, you know,
Would you give this a Ned Stark?
Possibly. I would possibly. I think I would give it
a Viper versus a Mountain.
I would maybe even give it a Jon Snow.
Well, you give it a Jon
I'd
Snow.
give it a wee Jon Snow.
You give it a right Jon Snow.
I'd give it a right Jon Snow.
Okay, so Euan gives the game a right Jon Snow.
Behind the bike sheds.
Right, let's talk about XCOM, the board game. Let's do that.
Yeah, actually, that's a fair shout.
We talked about this in a really early episode,
yeah.
But like I say, I'm not selling those episodes anymore. Okay, you can't buy them anymore.
You're just putting negative marketing out about them, like.
That's it. I'm negging our own episodes now. So XCOM, the board game. This falls in there was a period 2 or 3 years ago where like a lot of games were coming out with apps, and you needed the app to run the game, and it seems to have just all of a sudden disappeared again.
Well, I mean, we talked about Alchemist.
Alchemist is the other one, which I think came out about the same time.
Yeah, I remember that being a thing at the time.
And it was definitely a thing.
I can't think of any others to be honest, but it's probably
but apparently, like, people have been saying, oh well, this is going to be the thing, and you might not see some like app-based board games for a couple of years, and they'll reappear again because people have been inspired, but it takes that long for them to actually churn a board game out. But this has been
you look at, like, Alchemist is very, well, it's obviously spent a lot of time being designed to get to that point, or maybe XCOM not so much.
But this is 2015, so this is a couple of years ago now. Okay. The XCOM, the board game, came out. And so this was kind of in between, or like, you know, just while XCOM 2 was being made,
Yeah.
or being the finishing touches kind of being put on it or whatever. So they were kind of just building up with the hype of that, I think. Now it's a game where you are playing as it's more part of like the actual what would you call it, the bureaucracy side of the XCOM game.
Yeah.
Management.
The management side, yeah.
management
It's
and
the
stuff like that.
in-between levels bits is more what this is. It does have a squad thing in it, where you do go out and shoot some aliens, but it's really just playing matching symbols.
I mean, basically, it's what they've tried to put as a flavour of everything that's in the game. I mean, there's I don't think there's anything
Without
really
the tactical element of actually shooting anything.
yeah.
It's more like, can you actually afford to shoot
Yeah.
them? Then?
But it's a cooperative game, so you're playing, and again, this is a game where you should play it with a maximum amount of people. You should play it with 4 people, and everybody's got a separate role. So there's roles that are, you've got the commander, the chief scientist, the something else, and the squad leader.
Commander, chief scientist,
I just
operations officer.
It's something like that.
I just remembered I was in charge of planes.
Yeah, right, and you were terrible at it.
I was horrible at it.
Aye. So the chief scientist is in charge of like research and technologies. You've got the person who's in charge of both
Planes.
the the app and planes.
Yeah.
I think sorry, the money and planes. You have somebody who's in charge of the app, so actually controlling the app itself, and they also deal with satellites. And then you've got the squad leader who's in charge of the soldiers and sending them out on missions.
Which one deals with crises again? Is that the commander, or is that
the person that deals with the money, the financial,
the
financial guy.
Yes.
I would always put all the money on my planes, though.
Yes. Now, what the app actually does, the app actually runs the game, and it's quite an interesting thing because, like, this game comes with no rules, really. It's got a sheet of paper that tells you, download the app from here, and here's how you can set things up in the meantime.
Yeah.
But the actual app itself tells you how to play the game. So there is a tutorial mode. You can change the difficulty on it, which is an interesting thing for a board game. Having difficulty settings.
You don't get that too often, maybe.
You do have board games that have difficulty settings, but having an app that just sets everything up for you is quite cool.
Yeah.
And it'll randomise things like the aliens that are that actually appear in certain missions and stuff like that.
That's pretty cool.
Now, the app's quite necessary for this game, solely because you're not supposed to really know what's coming.
Yeah.
And it really...
these things.
There are probably ways of randomising these things actual, like, without an app.
About 1,000 decks of
you'd
cards
be there for
or whatever.
6 hours playing this game, probably. So you just start the app running once you've got everything set up. And I mean, what you've got on the board in front of you is just basically... You know, you've got a map of the world, and then you've got some spaces to put some cards, like research cards and crisis cards, and you've got a place that keeps track of the continent's panic levels.
Yeah.
Everything like in the video game, really.
Everything you would expect from an XCOM game. So you start the app running, and the app will say stuff to you like, the chief scientist takes new technology, and the chief scientist will draw 6 cards and they'll look at them, and then the app will next say, okay, there's some UFOs appeared over these continents, so you put the UFOs on the board, and then the next thing might be, you know, here's how much money you have this round, so the person in charge of money counts up that much money, and then it'll be, you know, there's an enemy in the base, so you draw an alien card and you stick it in the base, and then you keep doing all these different things. But the whole thing is timed.
Yeah.
Okay, so you only have a certain amount of time to actually react to all these things, so it gets a bit frantic, so the person that's in charge of the app is allowed to really look at the app, so they have to be barking orders at people, basically. So you'll be sitting there saying, okay, you now have to defend the base, you need to put these soldiers into, you know, fight these aliens, and the alien cards have got different symbols on them, the soldiers have got matching symbols, so you have to match the symbols up with the aliens, make sure you've got matching things, and but you're only getting like a few seconds to do each thing, and then you have to start like making decisions on the spot about, you know, you've got like 4 continents that have got maybe 2 or 3 UFOs each in them. Which ones are you going to defend? Well, you have to check the panic level to see which ones are most panic, because you might want to save those. You don't want continents going into panic, you start to lose funding. But then you've only got a few seconds to make that decision and to look and check and see what the continents are. And some of those, like those little tokens, aren't the easiest things to tell which continent is which. So
sometimes, you have a wee moment of like, is that Africa or South America?
Yeah, you do. That's the one in particular.
It's
always that problem. So yeah, eventually the timed phase ends, and then you just have to deal with what you've done. you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure you've not gone over budget, which means you have to count up every single plane that you've put on the board, every satellite you've put on the board, every soldier you've put on the board, every scientist you've put on the board. You have to count them all up and make sure that you've not gone over your budget. Because if you do, bad shit happens. And then you'll go through everything. You'll start off by researching technologies, and there's a pretty simple dice rolling mechanic in this when it comes to successes and failures. So you roll an alien die, which is an 8-sided die, and you roll some special XCOM dice, which are blank on 4 sides and have a success symbol on 2 other sides. And if you've put, say, 2 scientists in to research 1 bit of technology, you roll 2 dice for that. And you always roll the alien die. And you can keep rolling even if you fail, okay? But you don't want to fail on the alien die, because the alien die, there's a little marker, a tracker thing on the board. It starts off at 1 every time you try and do something. If you fail and try again, you move that up to 2. If you fail and try again, you move that up to 3. And if you ever roll that number or lower on the alien die, you have completely failed at doing this, and you lose all the stuff that you were trying to do. So if you were researching something, you lose those scientists. Interestingly, if you were fighting aliens and you've got a whole squad full of people and they fail, all those soldiers die. And it costs money to hire new soldiers. So it becomes a head fuck, because then you have to like think about, when you're doing the timed phase, how many like planes and soldiers and scientists and stuff you're putting out. You want to save some money and not spend it all on all this stuff to try and buy new soldiers at the end of the round and stuff. So there's a lot going on in this game. Okay, there is a hell of a lot going on, but I think it really captures the XCOM feel.
Oh, definitely.
I think it does a good job of that.
Yeah, because it is all about the management side of things, and in terms of like XCOM's, I wouldn't say it's the biggest appeal of the game, because obviously the squad part of it is everything, but it always comes back to that, and if you do that badly, that's where you're just going to lose that's kind of what it comes down to. But yeah, it can be a real head fuck. I'm trying to remember, did we do it on hard?
We did it on hard.
Or did we win it eventually?
We won eventually, aye.
Yeah, we scraped a victory right at the end.
But probably because I left and somebody took over my position.
Well, this was the other week after.
Yeah, we're not talking about when we played it a year ago, Pawel.
That's what I mean.
We've played it like twice in the past couple of weeks, I think.
Okay.
A couple of sessions.
Well, it's not that long a game to play either.
No, it's pretty quick.
You rattle through it with the app and everything, and it would be frustrating if it was a long game, really.
Well, I can just say that games are easier or harder to learn, especially when you've played them for the first time. If you're playing a game for the first time and it's difficult, you still usually have time to learn the rules by observing what other people are doing. In this game, your role is essentially just your own, so you cannot learn from others.
Yep.
And turns are timed. So you're gonna, if you pick it up for the first time, you're gonna do it the same way I did. So you're just gonna fail badly simply because
right. No, I'm going to disagree with that point. Because I remember your first time playing this game, and it was a fucking tragedy.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Alright, now because you were in charge of the money, and what you did was you spent all the money on planes.
I liked my planes.
And nothing else.
Well, nobody else deserved the money. I thought that planes were more important here.
You did think that planes were more important, and you were wrong.
I know I was wrong. But that's my point, really.
So when it came round to like
position.
The app was telling us to put soldiers in the base to defend it from the aliens.
But there's nothing in the budget.
The squad leader would turn to Pawel and say, "How many soldiers can I put in the base?" And Pawel would say, "None."
We have no money.
Because we have no money, because I've spent it all on planes.
That's what I mean. It's a cooperative game, but it's essentially the weakest link in the chain.
It's Pawel.
Yeah, well. Yes.
It does outline actually how important the commander role. I mean, you are in charge essentially. You're dealing with, because one of the things that comes out of the crises that basically just knacker certain things. They'll panic places. You'll lose.
Horrible.
They're horrendous. But usually you get a choice of 2. So you're throughout the time phase as the commander, constantly trying to choose between the lesser of 2 evils.
Yeah, and
you're
getting blamed for it.
Oh yeah. Actually, that was one thing I was going to mention. The last couple of times we played it recently, we've all been very lenient on that. Like nobody's, because I went to commander in the first game. Nobody gave me any shit for any of my choices. No one gave you any shit for any of your choices.
I think that's because the people we'd played it with had all had a go at that role at some point,
and they realised how
kind of
horrendous
understood how horrendous that choice is to make.
Yeah, and you're not always going to get it right.
And you don't have perfect information when you're trying to make these decisions either. So it can be really a gut instinct sometimes on whether you're going to let North America fall into panic or let like Africa fall into panic, for example.
So this is a very stressful game.
It's very stressful, and it's designed to be that way, and it should be. There's an alien invasion going on, for fuck's sake.
Try to deal with it.
Well,
Try to deal with that.
You got something against aliens then?
I'm alienist.
There you go.
Well, when there are a coalition of different aliens that have been psychically drawn together by some weirdo to invade Earth, like, I think most people would have a problem with that.
I like that. Now we're getting properly into the theme now. Nice.
No, you have to understand.
You've fallen into his trap, Euan.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, he wanted me to describe the plot of XCOM. Something that doesn't come up in this game, by the way, I'll give you that. So
there is... I mean, really, let's face it, the theme, you could probably remove it and do something else with it.
I mean, I'd admit it's a lightweight game.
Yeah.
When you consider that really all it comes down to is one mechanic.
Which is rolling dice.
Rolling dice for a certain thing. But it works. And it's quite enjoyable to play. It'll pass an hour or so quite stressfully.
Well, yeah, I mean, the stressful part is the timed phase.
Aye.
And then, it is like you say, after that, it's just a case of you're just rolling a bunch of dice. And the stress is off. You're just really dealing with, like, are these dice rolls going to succeed or fail?
And
to
then,
set up
and
your
then
next
with the blame.
round. Yeah, and then everybody
is
points a
important
finger
in
and blame
games
at
like-
Pawel
yeah.
because he spent all the money on planes.
And they were nice planes.
I'm never letting that go, by the way.
No, it's fine
Sounds like
because they were lovely.
That's two gaming things I'm never letting go from you.
I'm sure we'll accumulate more.
Yeah. One was the extortion in Civilization.
Yes,
I cherish that.
Pawel and the German Poles.
I hope that becomes like such a big story on this podcast, like that we do get people asking like us to recreate what actually happened, because we've never really fully described it.
We should make a video.
We should do a
dramatic video. Aye.
Oh yes.
I'm gonna wear my smuggest face for it.
Yeah, we need to get actors to play the pair of them. Dramatization may not have happened.
Just try. We need to like dress up as the civilizations we were. So you were Germany, weren't you?
Yeah, I would have.
Who was?
Very,
I was the Arabs. That's right. I was the Arabs.
I would have ridiculous moustache.
Oh yeah. You got to get a little spiky
Full
helmet.
Kaiser.
Spiky
Kaiser.
helmet,
Right,
absolutely. Yeah. Right, I think we've got one more game to talk about.
Yeah, well, that was XCOM. Is that Eric M. Lang?
Yes,
Yes, it is. Okay, Eric M. Lang, and that's another Fantasy Flight game, just like Game of Thrones. So
Indeed.
we've gone heavy into Fantasy Flight.
Well, Fantasy Flight
yet
are
again.
known for doing these kind of adaptation.
Yeah,
That's
they do very themey games.
it's their bread and butter.
That is their bread and butter. It is indeed. Right, so we're going to move on to something completely different. And this is Discworld Ankh-Morpork, which is a...
Tree Frog Games.
By Tree Frog Games, yes, and it's a Martin Wallace design. Martin Wallace, a pretty well-known guy, and done stuff like Brass, which is a game that we really need to break out again.
I think we maybe played it twice, and that like about 10 years ago or something.
Yeah, and it just fried our brains. But
it was.
I remember it be... See, the thing is, I think it felt really heavy at the time because we weren't that into board gaming yet.
Possibly,
I think it was one of the early games I bought.
Possibly breeze through it now.
Yeah, we'd probably get more to grips with it now, but I do remember it being a bit of a slog. But good game. Definitely good game. So yeah, this is Discworld. So this is based heavily in the Terry Pratchett's Discworld universe. But it's
All hail Terry Pratchett.
It's all set in Ankh-Morpork.
Yeah.
Ewan, in fact, run us through this. This is one of your favourite games, isn't it?
I do really enjoy this one. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly.
I thought maybe I'd mixed you up with somebody else there, but
I'm a big Terry Pratchett Discworld fan.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Me too.
But yeah, and it has all those elements from it. It's a relatively simple game in terms of what you're doing in the game. Essentially, it's area control around Ankh-Morpork, and there's something like 12 different areas?
12 districts.
12 districts, yeah. But it's made interesting by, at the start of the game, you're handed out roles for you'll have some kind of objective for your particular role. So you've got classic characters from the Discworld canon. You can be Sam Vimes, you can be the veterinary, the patrician. You can be one of the lords. There's the three. Is it three
There's
of them?
three lords.
Three of the lords. They all have the same victory condition. You got Chrysoprase the troll, who you just basically have to accumulate money.
Yep.
And
The Dragon King of Arms.
King of Arms, which is a slightly obscure one, but it
Yes.
works well. It's a good role, and you used it quite effectively in this.
No, it wasn't me.
Oh no, it wasn't you.
It wasn't me. No.
Yeah,
I was
remember.
Chrysoprase, unfortunately.
Yeah, you fell foul of that one.
But that's one of the interesting things about this game, like you say, is the fact that it's the roles that determine how you win the game.
Yeah.
So everybody's got a different thing now. Because there's three lords in the game that are identical, you do have a tendency to believe that everybody else at the table is one of those people. If you see what I mean, it's like, because the odds are that, one or two people at this table is one of those people, and those are the area control guys. So those are the guys that win the game by controlling a certain number of areas.
So roles are secret then?
The roles are secret, yes. But then you've got, like you say, Chrysoprase, it's all about money for him. If you get a certain amount of money, you win. Veterinary just has to have a certain number of people in different areas or something.
He basically has to have a minion. You basically have to have a minion in... It's dependent on the number of players, because I think it's...
Yeah,
I think it's
I
like
think
the
they all
fewer
are,
players,
so.
because it is up to like all 12 or something, if you're in like a 2 or 3 player game.
The Dragon King of Arms, we want trouble markers in every single... as many areas as possible.
Makes
Who am I missing? Vimes.
Vimes
needs to burn through the deck.
Aye.
Okay, so that gets us to what actually drives this game, which is the deck.
Yeah. You have a deck of cards with classic Discworld characters, places, just general concepts that turn up. Things like the Ankh-Morpork Fire Brigade, which is always a hilarious
and I have to
concept.
say, like, it's been done with a lot of love.
Oh yeah,
That. Like, there's a lot of like just silly in jokes that only people that would read Terry Pratchett would understand.
Which I'm assuming is every single person listening to this podcast.
Yeah, probably. Aye.
Probably anyone that's picked up this game for one thing.
The peeled nuts, for example. There's one card in the game which is completely useless. It does nothing, and it's the peeled nuts.
Yeah, and that's the sort of stuff that.
Oh, glorious.
Or like the head of the Clowns Guild, Dr. Whiteface.
Yes.
There's something quite terrifying about him, and they do capture that on the card, and you really don't want him. You don't want to have to deal with him.
No, you don't want to have to deal with
basically
him at all.
essentially gets put into your hand as something you can't get rid of, and basically lowers your hand limit, essentially, because he's taking up space.
So yeah, the game's driven by cards, and so basically, that's, like you say, it's a big deck of cards. I've got all these different characters and places and stuff like that from the Ankh-Morpork.
Yeah.
And you draw a certain number of cards at the start of the game, and you basically just play these cards, and they've got symbols on the top. And these symbols will be things like you can place a minion in somewhere. So everybody's got a bunch of minions.
Yeah.
If you put a minion in a place, if you've got more minions than anybody else in that place, you control that place. Which, again, is one of the winning conditions of the three lords that are in the game. You've got other things like you can build buildings, so if you build a building in a certain area, it counts for control, but you also get a special ability which is dependent on which area it is, so each of the 12 areas. Then it's simple stuff like let you take $1 from the bank or something like that. There are cards that just give you money, there are cards that let you assassinate other minions, and there are cards, a lot of the cards, in fact, just about all of them have some sort of event written text on the cards.
Yeah.
That basically let you do something special. Which might be something like, move somebody else's minion somewhere else or something like that. Or you've got other symbols which are like arresting things. So when you arrest something, you remove a trouble marker. Now, trouble markers are only put on the board if you place a minion in an area that already has a minion in it. If you arrest something, you take the trouble marker out. That's right.
Yeah, well, if you take a minion out of an area, even if you I think it's the same if
but that's assassination,
as well, yeah.
Or if you just move them somewhere else, you remove the trouble marker. But I think you can. There is the card symbol which just arrests trouble markers, basically. And all the wizards have an event symbol on them, including Rincewind.
Yeah, because they essentially muck with the fabric of time and space.
They fuck everything up.
Yeah.
So they can start fires. They can summon demons from other dimensions which get in the way of area control and stuff like that. They let trolls out. They fucking cause earthquakes that destroy buildings and all sorts of just random shit.
Yeah.
So,
But all the wizards are also just cards you draw, yeah?
they're also just cards. Now,
They
the interesting thing, there's 8 of them, I believe. But I think Rincewind's the only one, because the deck's separated into 2 colours. There's a lighter sort of back and they're darker back,
Yeah.
and you always put the darker back cards at the bottom and the lighter cards in the top. And
So
Rincewind's the only one in the top half. Alright, so only Rincewind is going to come out in that sort of first half in the game, but at the second half of the game, you're going to have like Ridcully and the who's the what's the name of the guy? Ponder Stibbins and stuff like that. They all, the Dean and all that. They all start appearing in the second half of the game and causing fucking chaos. And you play through this game until somebody at the start of their turn fulfills one of their winning conditions, or what fulfills their winning condition. Sorry. And that's an interesting thing. You can only win at the start of your turn. So if something happens, if somebody spots, oh shit, there's 8 trouble markers on the board here, that means if somebody's the Dragon King of Arms, they'll win the game if it comes back around to their turn. You can try and do something to stop it by playing a card to maybe get rid of one of those trouble markers. So it's an interesting thing. You have to keep your role secret and try and get in a position where when it comes back round to your turn, you're still winning, because then you win the game.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty quick game.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Like half an hour at the most,
Nice.
I would say.
Yeah, you rattle through it.
I
mean, the longest it's going to take is if Vimes wins, basically.
Yeah,
when you go through
because
the
Vimes
entire
has to
deck.
burn through the entire deck. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that there's like a real strong thematic idea behind that, essentially, that he's just getting to the bottom of things,
He's
just shutting everybody down, and like
He's under siege.
In
almost.
in a game where there's more people and everybody's kind of trying to stop the main, like, they're alright, okay, you're going to see, alright, there's about to be 8 trouble markers, that's when they start taking them off, or see people going for more control.
He's got control of all that many areas,
Yeah.
we've got to stop that.
That's the kind of one where Vimes really excels because everybody's kind of keeping everything in limbo, which is perfect, so you just keep burning through the cards.
Oh, excellent.
So this is it's a light game. It does not take a lot of time. There aren't a lot of rules. It's essentially the rules of the game are just you do
cards.
what your cards say, and then when you've fulfilled your winning condition, you win. So light game, takes about half an hour, and it's, like I say, it's done with so much love towards the Discworld and Terry Pratchett world, like Ankh-Morpork and stuff like that. That if you're a fan of those things and you're a board gamer, you should have this game. Because it's brilliant. It is a really, really good game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a joy for a Terry Pratchett fan any time you play this. Like, you always get a little thrill of seeing all these characters and everything.
Having played the game so many times, even now I still forget what cards are in that deck, and you go, there's Captain Carrot.
Well, there's so many.
And there's all sorts of things going on there. Mr. Taya Timmy. Don't call him tea time. And so if you're not a Terry Pratchett fan, you've probably got no fucking idea what we're talking about.
A lot of stuff might be going over people's heads, but
yeah, I recommend this game as a light game. I mean, you could even use this as a filler game, even though it doesn't come in a filler-sized box. It's a standard square board game box. It's got a proper-sized board and everything like that, but it plays quickly and it's fun.
There's only a few pieces. It's really the deck that's quite big, but. Yeah,
it really does feel like Martin Wallace designed the game after having read a lot of light-hearted Terry Pratchett books.
Yeah, he could have just rattled
serious
through.
Designer like him.
Yeah, it's just gone through every book set in the Ankh-Morpork and then just gone, well, I think I'm on board with this.
Nice artwork as well, I have to say, on the cards.
It's lovely.
Very nice artwork. So yeah, that was Discworld Ankh-Morpork by Terry Pratchett and who was it?
Martin Wallace.
Terry Pratchett by Martin Wallace from the Terry Pratchett world.
Right. Terry Pratchett, I don't think had any hand in the designing of this game.
And who was the publisher again?
Tree Frog.
Tree Frog Games. I was going to call them Bullfrog, but no, that was Syndicate.
Yes.
Right, let's wrap this up. So we will give out all our internet stuff. So that's our email address, which is firstplayertoken@gmail.com. That's FIRST player token. We are on Facebook, Twitter, SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. That's all the larger unnecessary first player token. The exception being Twitter, which is at 1st player token.
It's once player token if you have difficulty remembering that.
It is Euan, thank you very much. My Twitch username is unnecessary Chris if you want to watch me streaming some video games, and we have been streaming board games on there as well.
Yeah, hopefully going to be getting some more on the go soon.
Yep.
Because it's enjoyable, and people seem to be
Yeah,
reacting to it, seem to be getting a bit of an involvement, so that's good.
And our YouTube channel is getting a few more hits. We've passed 2,000 views.
Bloody hell, not
There
bad.
you go. Not bad for people that just play board games badly. We have a website, that's firstplayertoken.com, but look, I'll fix it, right?
Something's coming up there.
We have a Discord, ask us for the link to that, and we are part of the Podnose Network.
The UK's leading entertainment podcast network, who are now currently taking submissions for 2017. I had a wee look because I was sharing some of their stuff out today. I think they're up to about 30 odd podcasts at this point, which is quite a bit. And there do seem to be quite a few new ones joining. A lot of people seem to be getting involved today. So, yeah, check it out. And also vote for, I've forgotten the name of it now, Strange Times. For the British Podcast Award, which I went and did today, and know that I'm going to get a load of bump from the...
Well, that's not making people want to go and vote for it.
Well, I realised, no, it was just a thing where I realised afterwards that I hadn't ticked the... Well, I had either ticked or hadn't ticked the box.
Oh, is this one of those, you tick it, sometimes you tick it and sometimes you don't?
Yeah, they mix it up.
Yeah,
because
like
basically all these websites are
days.
in league and they all want your email address to be knackered.
They don't want you to have an email address.
Yeah, they want to bombard you to, like, out of communication, basically.
Drama.
Okay, so that was the end of that bit of cynicism and the end of the episode.
Woo!
So we will be back next week where Pawel will have a hell of a lot to say, I believe, for our video games episode.
There's going to be a certain game being discussed.
There'll probably be 2 certain games being discussed, I think.
I'm not sure if I'll be ready to discuss the game of this week yet, because I'm going to need more time to process that. And there is a lot of...
I've already made some notes.
There is a lot of love to be shared for the previous game.
Yeah.
Right. Are you going to get any sleep between now and then?
I've not planned that, no.
Okay.
No.
In case you wonder what we're talking about, Mass Effect Andromeda.
Well,
Pavel camped out last night to get it or something.
it's fine.
Okay, so we will see you next week for our video games episode.
Indeed we will.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye!